Hello and welcome to polyplane.com. Today we're going to be starting a two-part series of a couple of different means of exporting an object or a curve out of Rhino or out of your 3D modeling program and using those curves in other ways, such as sending them to a laser cutter, or maybe you need to extract dimensions off of something, or maybe you need a series of paths to create an illustration. So for me, Rhino is actually the quickest way for me to draw out what I want because, all the tools are pretty self-explanatory. You can draw out a form here, take a line, and, split it just by, typing a series of commands or even just pushing buttons and then got your part. I just feel like its curve tools are so powerful, why not use them for other stuff outside of modeling. So what I have here on my screen is just a drawing of a series of concentric curves, and all of these are just closed curves. And what I want to do is I want to show you a couple of tools that I haven't really gone over yet. One of these is the dimensioning tool, and then after that I want to show you how you can take something. This curve is technically a vector, and how you can take that vector and put it into other programs and use it. There's a little icon up here, a couple buttons over from the render globe, called linear dimension. So if you click and hold on that, all of these dimensioning tools come out. Now in Rhino, this is what it is. In other programs, sometimes this information would be over here in an object properties window, but because Rhino is meant for kind of sketching out to truly modeling out things that are going to go into production, its dimensioning tools are a little more robust. So you can click on one of these and then click out points and get dimensions to come out, which is great because I can't tell you how many times I've been on the phone in a meeting and having to answer questions about dimensions and stuff, and it really is kind of nice to have these dimensioning tools right at your fingertips to say, yeah, that piece is 15.46 inches in diameter, or whatever. Also because you can do what I'm about to talk about next, which is exporting. You can click on a shape, you can dimension it, you can give it hatch marks to show cross sections and all this stuff. And it's really cool and really useful. So if I have this and I want to bring it into another program, it's just as easy as going File and then Export Selected, and then I can just pick a directory for these shapes. So we'll just call this path, and then under your export options in Rhino you have an Adobe Illustrator format that you can use, and that's pretty universal. So I would save that and then come into Illustrator. So here I have my path that I just exported, and I can do all of the other operations that I would normally do in Illustrator to my shape. So you can do a blend thing here, whatever. The reason being is that it's all vector data. So, Rhino understands how to export curves into another program. The other cool thing about this is the direct translation. You can then take this to Photoshop, where I can then copy my path into a Photoshop document and use it as a mask, and then do an illustration using those masks to create whatever it is I'm creating. In this case, it's like some futuristic watch. So you can see how the curves can be very effective in just, going back and forth between the two. If I wanted to go back into Rhino with these paths, I could just select them, and then in Photoshop you can export paths to Illustrator, save it out, and then open it back up, and then grab it, give it some dimension, scale it down if you need to, and then take this and then come back into Rhino with it. So you can File, export. You can export in Illustrator to DXF, which is a format that Rhino reads. So then I go back into Rhino, and then I can just insert this back in. Come down here and select DXF. There's the path. Okay. So we just successfully went from Rhino to Illustrator to Photoshop, back to Illustrator, back to Rhino. Coolest part is all of our vectors, if I explode this because it's a block instance when you insert something, it still has all of its original shapes. So it's a very useful tool for that, and you can use those paths for literally anything because they are vectors. So you can scale it infinitely, you can bring it into all sorts of programs for all sorts of functions. My typical workflow, because I'm an industrial designer, all the time I build curves in Rhino, save them as an Illustrator file, and then bring them into Photoshop to use them as paths for illustration. That's how I do a lot of these sort of, speed form sort of things, is I'm just, drawing out lines. I've got a couple of garbage masks in here for things, but overall these curves were all drawn in Rhino and then exported out. So, it's a quick way, if you don't have the time to model something up, it's a quick way to at least draw the original curves and then use those curves to draw out your form. So check it out. I recommend, messing around, seeing what happens. If you have any questions, don't hesitate in asking. I'm always going to answer your emails and your comments. So next week we're going to go over some exporting options for 3D and show you kind of how the back and forth of that work. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.